So how about I broadcast, yeah, we'll then we'll be in the room with all the folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick audio check. So if you can hear me, please type in the chat that you can hear me. Thank you, Michael. We don't have a prize for you today, but I do appreciate you chiming in that you can hear me, and I will go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to today's webinar, Making Community Colleges, Democracy's Colleges, again, a roundtable discussion. Very happy to partner MCCA. I guess I should introduce myself. I am Kalynn Ramsey, Director of Membership Engagement and Professional Development at MCCA, and I have the honor to partner with Campus Compact for this session, which explores the role community colleges do and can play in promoting a healthy democracy. Give me just a second. Sorry, my screen took away my script. Facilitators will share resources and guide students, faculty, administrators, and community partners in a discussion about the challenges and opportunities facing community colleges. As communities, states, and the nation confront multiple crises, including a pandemic, an economic recession, protests against racial injustice, deep political polarization, and rampant misinformation, community colleges can meet this moment and lead the way to strengthening our democracy through civic learning and democratic education. This webinar is brought to you by 25th Hour. 25th Hour Communications is the premier full-service marketing and communications agency serving community colleges nationwide. They provide expertly crafted, comprehensive marketing programs weaving traditional tactics with innovative digital solutions to meet your students where they are. Whether that's on social media, reading a local newspaper, print is not dead, or engaging with their favorite streaming platform. Their team is made up of industry titans and fresh eyes, revolutionizing higher education marketing and public relations. When you're racing against the clock, they are the extra hour you need in your day. Join them at the leading edge as they grow the community college landscape. The best part, they are local to Missouri, 25comm.com. Take a look. A few housekeeping items to go over. Everyone has been muted and video turned off. We can unmute you at the end for discussion about voting, or you can type your questions in the chat or Q&A box. Questions can be for the panelists or other questions related to the co-host organizations. As a participant, if you see a question you would also like addressed, you can upvote those questions. When we get to the Q&A portion, our moderator will take questions from the top. As a participant, if you see a question you would also like addressed, you can upvote the questions. Oh, I think I already said that, sorry. We will be sending a recording of this webinar. And today's speakers, without further ado, are Verdis L. Robinson and Andrew Crocker. Verdis L. Robinson is the Director for Community College Engagement at Campus Compact. As an advocate of community college civic education, Robinson leads Campus Compact's Community Colleges for Democracy Network as part of his portfolio and continues the work he began 2 years ago as the National Director of the Democracy Commitment, expanding membership, resources, and programming opportunities for community colleges. Before becoming National Director of TDC, Robinson was a tenured Assistant Professor of History and African American Studies at Monroe Community College in Rochester, New York, where he taught web-enhanced writing intensive service learning history courses for 10 years. Additionally, Robinson is a fellow of the Aspen Institute's Faculty Seminar on Citizenship and the American and Global Polity and the National Endowment for the Humanities Faculty Seminar on Rethinking Black Freedom Studies, the Jim Crow North and West. He is also a public scholar of humanities at New York. Robinson is the author of Bacon's Rebellion and the Transformation of America, a reading to the past game in development, a charge to keep. I have the biography of Bishop Charles Campbell, and has co-authored the upcoming Beyond These Gates, Mountains of Hope in Rochester's African American History, as well as contributed to higher education's role in enacting a thriving democracy, civic learning, and democratic engagement theory of change. Robinson also serves on the advisory boards for the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, Bringing Theory to Practice, and the Reacting Consortium Board of Reacting to the Past as its chair of the Inclusion Committee. He holds a BM in Voice Performance from Boston University. I hope he's not judging me right now. A BS Cum Laude and MA in History from SUNY College at Brockport, and an MA in African American Studies from SUNY University at Buffalo. He is currently the Lenora Montgomery Scholar at Medville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. Andrew Crocker has been an instructor at OTC since 2007 and a full-time instructor since 2016. Andrew earned his master's from the Missouri State University in 2013. He co-sponsors Politically Active, a nonpartisan political science club here on campus designed to debate the issues, conduct politically minded activities, and inform students about upcoming elections. He teaches PLS 101, and starting in 2021, he will also be teaching PLS 103, which specializes in public policy. You also need to add this to your bio, Andrew, that you are on the advisory board of MCCA. So without further ado, I will now hand it over to Verdis.
All right, great, thank you. And I just want to make just an update. Around COVID, I switched careers, so I'm no longer the director of community college engagement. I'm the former director of community college engagement for Campus Compact and am a civic consultant, still championing civic engagement, civic education for community colleges with the Kettering Foundation, and a civic consultant with the Campus Election Engagement Project. And, you know, making community colleges, democracies, colleges again. And if we go to the next slide, we see that the notion of democracies community colleges as democracies colleges, we're going to talk about that. Then also talk about some of the community college priorities and what they have to do with anything. They have to do a lot, right? And ways to go with those priorities that is really guiding the way for community colleges nationally is this guided pathways movement, which most of you should be familiar with, if not engaged in currently now. If not, you will be. But ways to connect civic engagement to guided pathways. And for that, there's no magic wand, but I'm going to give you some examples of some programs that are doing that. And I'm going to try to do that within 40 minutes. So I may not get to all of the examples, but so that we can hear an example in your neck of the woods. Because right now I am calling you from Vermont. Don't ask me why. Now, if you go, so democracies as community colleges as democracies colleges, it echoes back to the 1947 Truman Commission report on higher education for democracy, which argued for the creation of a national system of community colleges. And today, these local institutions, they play key roles in democratizing higher ed and giving more people access to the American dream. Love community colleges because of this, and also because of their affordability, the accessibility, and open access admission practices. And community colleges have higher enrollments of lower income students, non-traditional students, and students of color than four-year colleges and universities. And they also have high percentages of immigrants and English language learners among their student populations. However, most community colleges struggle with sustaining holistic campus life because their students often work, take care of families, manage their responsibilities. And additionally, student success is often unfairly measured by a completion model, where in reality, community colleges students sometimes transfer directly into four-year institutions, or even leave, come back, that revolving door. So they get the bad rep as far as completion is concerned. But at the same time, these issues, along with the elitist perception of community colleges as junior colleges, tend to make community colleges invisible when compared to their four-year public-private brothers and sisters. This invisibility is unfortunate because community colleges embody a democratic society as they provide open access to higher education. How do we make the invisible more visible? How do we get more people to take notice of the value of community colleges, to see them as democracy's colleges, and to see students as democracy students? If you go to the next slide, one way that this is done is to understand the importance of civic engagement. But first, let's understand what civic engagement is, because it depends on where you go as their definition of what civic engagement is. So I like to go with Thomas Ehrlich. Thomas Ehrlich is basically the godfather of civic engagement and civic education. Right now, I think he's about 85 years old, as he's in California, and he's still championing civic education at Stanford University right now. And in 2000, he came up with this book about civic education, and he coined this definition, which I use, of civic engagement. It means working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing a combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivations to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. I like this because it talks about communities and the civic life of communities. And I was just thinking just today about the difference between our community college students and your typical four-year, even state and private students and their engagement with community. Well, the community college students are the community. So they are engaged, when they are engaging the community, they're engaging themselves. So that has to look different. It has to be different than the four-year model of community engagement, where 9 times out of 10 students are engaging outside of their own communities and their home communities. So, community college students are very different. Moving right along, we have also a notion of what this is Bernie Ronen's civic spectrum. And in this theory, Dr. Bernie Ronen, the late Dr. Bernie Ronen, was the assistant commissioner, no, not assistant commissioner, I forget what the title is, associate chancellor. He was a vice chancellor for the Maricopa Community College District, which is basically Phoenix's 10 community colleges, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, district of community colleges in the country. And he came up with how to really engage community college students, and it's through holistically engaging the whole person. A lot of times we like to go straight for the hands and straight to the action without realizing if we even care about it first. And when that happens, and if we just go for action, 9 times out of 10, it's episodic, it's not sustainable, because there's really no heart in it. There's really no care about it. Who can better care about issues in the community than people in the community? And if the students are from the community, yes, they are the ones that should be engaged more so in this work than they are currently. And that gets into our priorities, and I'll get into that in a second. But a lot of times we like to, even if we do engage the heart with the hands, in other words, the care and the action, a lot of times we don't really do our research. And so to understand what is the problem, what is the root cause of the problem, so you're not putting Band-Aids on open wounds and things of that nature. You're seeing what is that wound and how we take care of it. This spectrum really has influenced me and influenced a lot of civic engagement and civic learning. And it is one way that we talk to about the how, but why? Why? There have been several reported benefits of civic education. College and career readiness. I hear a little bit of priorities coming out here, but these are some of the reported benefits of civic education. College and career readiness, civic knowledge attainment and efficacy, the increased free expression and deliberation, long-term civic commitment, participation, life satisfaction. especially if we want to develop and build the communities of which our colleges are a part of and are in. The community economic health. So not just giving skills to a job, but talking about building up the economic health of that community and sustaining it for the sake of our community college students who are, again, the community. Retention, retention prevention, as well as improved campus climate. And I don't think that's retention prevention, but I have to look and see what I meant by that. But agency and capacity building, absolutely. These are some of the reported benefits of civic education. And some of these are our student learning outcomes. In other words, they're already meshing, but we're just not calling civic education or not really prioritizing it. But what are we prioritizing? But first, let's get into how we do civic education. Let's get into the how. How do we currently do it? With civic pedagogies, with democratic engagement, political learning, and electoral engagement, with community engagement. So we have all these fibers, all these tools already in our wheelhouse. We may have to adapt them sometimes, especially now with COVID. But at the same time, these are already in place, and a lot of them are already in place on our campuses, but in different spots. Sometimes student life, sometimes with academic services, they're all over the place. There's not one concerted effort, and also support and funding for this, even though they do happen on a regular basis on our campus. So what are the priorities? Some of the priorities that we have, and we can all name them, right? Workforce and economic development. You know, sometimes we call it career readiness. We want to take the development out of it and say career readiness. So it's more intuitive that if you come to a community college, we'll get you ready for a career so that when you get out, you can get a job. Hey, I mean, that's why I got 4 degrees so I can have a job, right? I mean, so it's not like we should not do that, but yes, we should. But those 21st century skills are also civic skills. Think about it. But we just don't call them civic skills. We call them soft skills or workforce readiness skills. They're the same skills as civic education skills. How do we bring that together? Completion is another big priority, with preparation, retention, graduation, and pathways to jobs, pathways to 4-year, and things of that nature. Access, equity, and conclusion is another priority, because lack of access, lack of equity, and lack of inclusion affects completion. It also affects workforce and economic development. This is all geared in going toward student and institutional success. This is how we community college, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, you all know this, but this is how community colleges keep the door open by saying that, you know, and that's why there's so much assessment, because a lot of the funding from community colleges are public funding, and the public wants to know what you're doing with its funds, especially the boards, especially endowments and things of that nature, and the state, and sometimes the federal government. So accreditation, and if you're not accredited, it's hard for those degrees to transfer, right? So so these are all current priorities. One thing I'm not mentioning that is the overarching priority right now, particularly right now, because we thought we were going to be good, is enrollment. So if I can prove that a student can come in and get a job, workforce and economic development, that impacts my enrollment. If I can say that you can come in and get out in a reasonable amount of time and not 6 years, completion, preparation, retention, graduation, that impacts the enrollment. If we can say that it's a one-stop shop, you don't have to go here, there, and everywhere to get all your first weeks, years met. I mean, we've been working on this, how to make this so it's not a barrier. And also, if students are hungry, how can they sew food pantries on? I mean, this is all going towards enrollment and completion, and it all goes down to student success. These are the priorities. These are not just the priorities on individual campuses, but nationally. to keep community colleges going, as well as to fight against the stigma against community colleges. If we go to the next one, we see that one way that community colleges nationally has tried to do this is through guided pathways. Therefore, a student comes in, they say that they're interested in history. Okay, we're gonna put you in the social science pathway. Here is your schedule for the next 2 years. Here's your advisor, and they know about social science. They're experts in social science. You're not going to a business person to be advised about to be a history major. So that's what was happening, and a lot of students were taking way too many courses that had nothing to do with their degree program, especially when they didn't know until halfway through, and then all of a sudden they have another year or two put on them. So that was a barrier for student enrollment as well as success. So guided pathways is great, but guess who was not at the table when we are redesigning curriculum for community colleges? Civic education and learning professionals were not. So 9 times out of 10, and on institutions, these guided pathways left out service learning, left out civic education, civic learning, and even left it out of the general requirements. And anything that is not a part of the general requirements and guided pathways is deemed a barrier to success. Financial aid won't even pay for it. So we got to either be at the table when we're doing this or get to the table by showing that it is geared towards priorities and there is a relationship. So how do we connect civic education and community college priorities? And I'm making good time too. I hope I'm not talking fast enough. I mean, too fast. But at the same time, again, there's no magic wand here. There's no Bible or book or manual about how to do this, because currently it's not really happening across the board. The people who are driving priorities are not talking civic engagement and civic learning. So, but how to do this? Don't worry, I'm getting them to a table very soon, in fact, next month, and we're gonna see what comes out of this. But I'm very concerned that if we don't do this, our civic education and civic learning will not be a part of community college curriculum to reach all community college students for full participation in the democracy, so we can have the democracy that we want instead of the democracy that we have. So what are the current, so how do we do this? We have a model. Here's College of the Canyons in California. I was just speaking to my contact there today, and they could smell smoke all the way in Southern California. So we're thinking about them right now. But they said, okay, we got equity, vision for society, guided pathways, and workforce readiness. Let's do this, and not just at College of the Canyons, but let's enter into a conversation to redesign our curriculum system-wide. So they have all these initiatives, they have these partnerships, they have a college success network, but everyone is thinking about ways of integrating civic learning and civication into that work. And so they got some grants to help them do that. In other words, when all this stuff was being constructed, someone was like, we are forgetting about this, but it's not easy to do that. So they are working on it. They're having conversations, they're exploring. And so they're at the beginnings of this. And next slide. So their goal right now, and they're working on it, is to re-examine the primary outcome of college education from one rooted in economics, this is community colleges, to one centered in civic meaning, individual purpose, and social responsibility. So they want to instill a sense of civic professionalism that's aligning or integrating civic learning and civic engagement with workforce and economic readiness, the professionalism. Among faculty who are able to encourage students to identify their values, voice their opinions, and listen to the ideas of others, but call it out what it is and saying, this is what you're learning right now. Help students recognize their values, follow their passions, find meaning and purpose for higher education. This has been a proven technique for retention and completion. Another example, Piedmont, Virginia Community College, you know, they already had in their mission to offer accessible, affordable, high quality educational programming that promotes student success and community vitality. We have similar, notions in all of our missions, but do we really assess it? Do we really do anything about it? Well, they have been working up until August 2017, which is about 3 years ago, when the Unite the Right rally happened in Charlottesville. And this is where Piedmont, Virginia Community College is, in Charlottesville. And of course, we all know what happened. If not, you can definitely Google it. And so the students were not coming from different parts of the state to different parts of the world. They were from that community, and they were definitely impacted by that. Not only were they impacted by that, because the students are not by themselves, mostly, their neighbors were impacted by that. Their families were impacted by it. Their children were impacted by it. And so the college said, we need to really find a way to engage this, but we need to engage all the students to make sure that they're okay. And it cannot be in just a government class. It cannot be in a political science class or a history class. It has to be across the curriculum. So they developed a quality enhancement plan for their and with their quality and implementation, they call it Civic Sense. And it's now a requirement, and it's now assessed. It's a part of their curriculum, and students will actively participate in civic life by voting in local, state, and federal elections. And to have that as a plan is not against the law. In fact, for it to get federal money, every college, pretty much community college, has to turn in a plan for at least voter registration. Actively participating in civic life by engaging in the public service and that improve the condition of communities. In other words, their own communities and the quality of life of people's lives, including their own and their families and their neighbors. Evaluate multiple perspectives to think critically about issues of public consequence. And this is across the board. This is in English courses, and particularly English 111. And those are the basic English freshman composition that everyone has to either take or pass. That's one way of doing it. So if everyone has to take the course anyway, and you're embedding those skills, those experiences, and that motivation and that empowerment, how powerful that is for students. And they're saying that what I'm learning is relevant to what's going on in my life right now. This is what our students want. They're looking for a way to do that because Facebook ain't happening for them. Why not doing in their classes? So they created voter guides. We're talking about individual classes and taking it on as a class project to make voter guides for their fellow students, nonpartisan voter guides. As well as college-wide service projects and deliberative dialogues, just to name a few of things that they're doing for that. Heartland Community College is one of my favorites that I like to talk about because I went out there and I got pulled over. I mean, anyway, because it's outside of Chicago, but 2 hours in a rare rural community. And I'm in a rural community right now. I'm on the soybean field. So it's a very, very different type of engagement that happens. But a lot of those students they have a feeder school, and that's the Illinois State University. So they thought that if we are going to spend time engaging and civically learning, civically with our students, and then they go to and they get lost at Illinois State University, it defeats the purpose unless it continues. So they had articulation agreements between the community college and the four-year college, and they have multiple programs that work hand in hand and work together. So community college students are mingling with four-year college students, And also that really helps with transfer. If they can see what the end result could be or who they could be in the next 3 or 4 years, it helps with the retention. And also if you take the civic engagement certificate, it transfers over into a degree program at the Illinois State University. So I mean, and that's another way of seeing the priority of completion and enrollment, and the priority that should be of civic engagement, civic learning. And Delta College is another one in which they made it into a graduation requirement. And they said that students are prepared as a outcome. Students are prepared for 21st century challenges at the level of an associate degree by successfully completing courses required for their degree. In doing so, students will meet these general education competencies. And we've seen all of these, right? The, wellness and reason quantitatively, think critically, that type of thing. They added think civically as a requirement. Demonstrate an understanding of diverse societies ranging from local to global in order to effectively engage effectively in civic life. So how do students get that requirement? Well, there is a civics course, a Civic 101 course that everyone takes to fulfill that requirement, or there are other courses that you can take to fulfill that requirement, but it's showing that priority, and we understand the 21st century challenges that are not just thinking critically and critical thinking, but also thinking civically. A deep commitment out of Delta College. And last but certainly not least, my own example. When I was a professor way back in the day, I'm just joking. And one of the ways that was happening was that in 2014, there was a 50-year anniversary of the race riots that happened that impacted the community. If you look at that picture right there, there are stores and everything across the street, and you see fire hoses, towards those buildings. Well, if you look really closely, and you really can't, but this is a very famous picture. You can look it up, the Rochester race riots. They're spraying people. This is in the 60s. This is not Mississippi. This is not the South. This is upstate Western New York. And there was a riot that happened and things of that nature. Well, those buildings are no longer there. It is now a food desert, economic desert. And we're trying to figure out why that happened. So the students said, we see the history, but this is our neighborhood. So we're going to do our own research. And they did. And they've discovered that that there was an emerging Black community that was in that neighborhood. And then urban renewal came and said, well, this is a slum, and we're going to take everything down, all the single family homes down, all of the temples, because it was a Jewish and Black community, all the temples down, and we're going to put up high rises. And displace them with jobs, displace them with their businesses that they had, and tore down everything and turn it into an industrial complex for businesses, not theirs. And then 10 years after, there was a race riot, and they wondered why. So I did this, I integrated it into my history classes, made it a part of the assignment. The students themselves created a walking tour, of which over 500 people went on this walking tour, guided by my students, as they told the real history of their neighborhood. And became leaders of it. And a lot of them right now are still working in that neighborhood because they had a sense of pride. Again, community engagement with community college students is a little different because they are a part of that community and not just temporarily. Next slide. And this is just some images of that effort that I'm still talking about and writing about to this very day. So it even impacted my life and my role in the community as a professor. So This is my contact information, and feel free to contact me at any time. I'm going to stop talking and yield the floor and to my colleague and our colleague, Andrew Crocker.
Thank you so much, Verdis, if I'm saying that correctly. That was very informative. I just wanted to jump in and really have a conversation for a short period of time about what exactly we formed our organization to do here at OTC. Just to remind you, I'm a political science instructor here at this college. I teach PLS 101. I also teach another class or two, but PLS 101 is my baby. That's the one I've been teaching since 13 years or so ago. I am also, as Kalynn mentioned a moment ago, the vice chair of the MCCA Faculty Advisory Board. I also happen to be Kalynn's favorite, so I have that going for me as well. What I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about what this organization does, what we did, and what you can learn about it. Next slide, please. Stand by one moment. My apologies, everybody.
Apologies, that is the only slide I have.
Okay, that's fine. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about it then. The good news is I also happen to be, this is not mentioned in my bio, I also happen to be incredibly handsome. So really my face is all you need. So I wanted to start off by just talking about what we do at OTC. At OTC, we are the student organization that I help co-sponsor is called Politically Active. I co-sponsor with a colleague of mine, Kara Griffin, who also teaches political science. What we do is we, with about a cabinet of about a handful to 2 handfuls of students in any given year, we form monthly, if not semi-monthly meetings and activities where we promote political understanding, increase political awareness for students. At the end of the day, we strive to remain nonpartisan. It's a student-run organization where they get to call the shots. Kara and I's job is simply anytime they want to enact a certain activity, have a certain meeting on a certain subject. Our job, of course, is to do everything we can to make that happen. So our track record is stronger than it is weak, I'm happy to say. This was founded back in 2018. We have over 100 student members that interact with us on our club Remind. We have Remind that we send out mass text to everybody. And we have our own cabinet, which we just had a bunch of those people graduate. And right now we're forming a brand new one. We're already about 3 or 4 strong. So, like I said, I'm a faculty sponsor, really a co-sponsor since I do it with somebody else. My job really is to give them as many ideas when they are lacking for ideas themselves, but mostly the students drive the bus. They get to pick the topics, they get to pick the activities. Ultimately, they get to drive the conversation, although they frequently ask me to moderate our conversations just in case somebody flies off the handle, which has been known to happen. This semester, we have already had a meeting on Black Lives Matter and police reform ideas. Those are not always the easiest conversations to manage. So my job is to moderate and, try to keep conversation on track. So we do this because our political systems are not particularly helpful to younger generations. The cost of living has been going up for a generation, but generally speaking, wages have remained stagnant over that same time period. Young people typically work entry-level jobs, and if we've learned anything in the 21st century is that there are going to be lots of recessions, and they are the ones who have the most to lose when there is one of all the age groups. Typically, young people are the ones that serve in the military. They most severely feel the effects of climate change, trillion-dollar budget deficits, student debt costs, class mobility policies. Compared to other generations, they are the ones that most severely feel the effects of this stuff. And so the youngest generations are also happen to be the most racially diverse and the most racially tolerant. Yet racial minorities and women are dramatically underrepresented in political power structures and, of course, in our government. So this begs the question, a question that students will sometimes ask me: does the government just not care about young people? Because oftentimes its policymaking does not march to the drum of their concerns. That is not the case. The government doesn't ignore young people. It ignores non-voters. It's a Democratic governor. I'm sorry, it's a Democratic government. And so it is reactive. It is only listening to voters at the polls telling it what to do. So for the record, young people have a poor track record of voting. Matter of fact, one of the things we realized was if we can, according to studies, you can increase voter turnout among all voters, but particularly young voters, if you increase their political literacy. So what we do at this organization is we try to form this club, and every couple weeks to month, we try to have a meeting that talks about something political, either in the headlines that we care about, such as, like we said, Black Lives Matter and police reform ideas, which we had about a week ago, or gun rights. There was a semi-scandal a few years back in a neighboring town about a gigantic cross that was on public lands. There's a really interesting podcast about the Constitution called Constitutional that we had a meeting on. Russian troll farms, faithless electors, 9/11 survivors. So at the end of the day, we really have been holding these activities to try to raise people's awareness on the issues, which brings us to the whole reason why I'm here. And that's in not just engaging voters, but engaging the community in the elections that nobody cares about in this area, and that's local elections. Every April, we have local elections, and nobody participates in them. I think about a year ago, our last local election in 2019 got 17% turnout, which is double what it normally does. So that's a huge victory, but normally it's single-digit percentage turnout. So what we decided to do was we just wanted to hold an event to raise awareness of not just what's on the ballot, but the people on the ballot for this local election. And so one of the ways we decided to do it was by holding what somebody had suggested here on campus, a human library, where you can show up to a location. If you're curious about what's on a ballot, you can walk over to the table and ask about this particular topic. You'll be talked to by people that support it. And then if you're like, that's interesting, you can walk over to the other side of the room and talk to the people who are opposed to it. So we give you a little flexibility to navigate the room on your own. And then of course we have the people themselves running for office. You can talk to them at their own tables. So this is a really ambitious idea. We had a lot of fun coming up with it, and planning it was grueling. But we have a 9-person city council. 5 of those seats were up. We had 9 people running for those 5 seats. Now, in addition to that, we had your typical tax question, which was called question 1. And it was like, do you want to continue this certain tax in order to pay for infrastructure for all these intersections and such? And of course, we also had a gigantic proposition, a nearly $200 million tax proposal to increase the education budget in order to build a couple new schools, improve infrastructure in a lot of them, and so on and so forth. It was called Proposition S. And so what we did was reach out to a whole bunch of these people that were supporting Proposition S. And there was a big organization called Yes on S. We reached out to them. They were like, would you like to have a table, please? And we reached out to people opposing S. And that turned out to be a little difficult simply because the Chamber of Commerce really drove the bus, at least partially drove the bus, I guess I should say, in getting Proposition S sculpted. And what these folks do very cleverly is they try to bring in all reasonable dissenters, people who would normally dissent. They bring them in on the process and try to create a proposition that even reasonable dissenters can agree to. Sometimes that leaves people who might not be as well credentialed as the only people left opposing it. But they're out there. Just have to Google a few news stories about, oh, these people didn't feel great about Proposition S. Well, you find those people, you Google them, you find them on social media, you reach out to them, and hopefully they contact you back. That's what we did, and it worked out eventually. Now, there were 9 city council candidates running for 5 open seats. In addition to that, there were also 3 school board candidates for 2 open seats. So we reach out to those folks as well. And we find issue advocates for the 2 tax measures, for Proposition S and for Question 1. And now Question 1 was something that had like total Chamber of Commerce support, almost complete community support. So really, we could not find official people who were out there. Sorry, my office turns off. The light turns off. We could not find people out there that had an official organization opposing Question 1. So we reached out to the local Libertarian Party and we were like, would you be interested in arguing against Question 1? And they were like, well, what is it? And we told them, well, it's a tax and they stopped us right there. They're like, well, do it. If you need somebody opposed to a new tax measure, we are your people. So, this took a lot of different, we reached out to dozens and dozens of people, which took a lot of time at the phone. Just about every afternoon, I'm making a half a dozen phone calls to various people. I'm happy to say that almost all the people running for city council and school board are super happy to do it. That's one thing that you should note, is that if you want to hold an event with local leaders and even state leaders who especially people from the House of Representatives, the Missouri House of Representatives, they have zero awareness. Like the people have zero awareness of who these people are. And so you are giving them an opportunity to meet them face to face. And so you get the rare opportunity as a voter of actually showing up to the polling booth eventually and knowing the name to the face, knowing the face to the name that you're potentially voting for. And these people jump at the opportunity. They got they want to run for office so they can help people. So of course they want to meet the people they want to help. So there wasn't a lot of difficulty in getting them to do it. There was just a lot of difficulty in just coordinating everything. At the end of the day, we had 9 candidates running for 5 open seats, but one of them was already going to be out of town. Literally every single person said yes, including the mayor, who was running unopposed, but the mayor was willing to come out and participate as well. We had people arguing for and against Proposition S on the on hand, and of course people arguing for and against Question 1 as well. And they were we generally had very little issues there. I will say that one of the things that I learned was that it was a extremely encouraging experience. These local officials, I work with several state officials, and they don't always respond to you. Sometimes they think, I have nothing to gain and everything to lose by being willing to go on record and talk, so they will blow you off. And unfortunately, we have struggled quite a bit here in Springfield with getting our own United States House of Representative in the House to participate in any debates, participate in anything. It's really hard to get these people to turn out. But local people are extremely enthused, and even the one person that couldn't make it probably would have as well. Now, we had over 100 people attended our human library, which took place over 90 minutes. As I said, the mayor of Springfield, Missouri was willing to talk to anybody willing to. We had our own politically active cabinet members walk through the room and interview office holders to ask how their campaign was going. What's if I was to get to know you and your campaign in 60 seconds, what should I know? And then if they ask a couple more questions, maybe grill them a bit. We also had a table set up that would help voters navigate where in Springfield they live and what district they live in, so they could find their appropriate city council candidates, because it makes no sense in talking to candidates from the north if you live in the south, and so on. We also had pieces of paper guiding people through what would be on the ballot, mock ballots that they could look through and see how they wanted to vote. And some instructors gave their students assignments to come through, talk to a few people, and then fill out a piece of paper for extra credit or whatever it is they may have assigned. So this was an extremely rewarding experience. We had a lot of fun doing it. And I would really recommend, especially for local elections, that you do it for your area as well. Now, the last local elections we had in 2020 had really almost nothing to vote on. However, for future local elections, I do know that we're circling back to this idea. One of the goals of this entire exercise was to increase political literacy for our student body, but also for the community. It was open to the community as well. And so it was just a classic example of bringing the classroom into the community and the community into the classroom. So if you're kind of wondering the same thing, if you're wondering what are some of the tripwires that I can avoid if you want to improve college community engagement on your campus, is to, well, first of all, align your mission, whatever your mission is for your organization or for this, even if you're not part of an organization like I am, if you're just an instructor who cares a lot and you want to go through something like this, please make sure you check your college's goals. And many colleges, if not every college, has strategic initiatives. You want to sculpt your event to what the college's goal is, because that makes it extremely easy to sell to the higher ups, because you need the college to sign off on it. You're using their space. And also something I hadn't thought of prior to holding this event, you need security personnel on hand as well. That's the case things like, we had no concerns whatsoever. We had a couple people who were representing a ballot issue who were a bit strange, but we had zero issues whatsoever with security issues. It's really important that when you're planning it, that you try to be as inclusive as possible. Use the staff to give you ideas. Use faculty, see if they have ideas. Really importantly, use your students, because what you're trying to do is attract students to these issues. It's really hard to do without students themselves weighing in and giving their input. So please use them. They are a valuable resource. Thanks to the students in Politically Active, I feel like we've been more effective at reaching out to their peers. You know, I'm just be straight with you, a 19-year-old male student's going to have a better idea at how to relate to other traditional college students than the 39-year-old gas bag that you're listening to right now. Now, I do want, you know, it's important, and I mentioned security a moment ago, you should be prepared for the worst thing that could happen. Now, in our circumstance, the best possible thing happened, which was everybody showed up. Everybody was awesome. All the participants were super interested in, so I was real happy about that. However, you need to make contingency plans. If somebody doesn't show up, what are you going to do? Because now, if somebody doesn't show up to oppose question one, well, now you only have somebody arguing for question one, and you don't have anybody against. Not a bad idea to lay out some fact sheets for yourself if you yourself need to sub in to be a person opposing an issue. Now, another thing you need to do is give it a shot. Just stay positive, give it a shot. Not everything's going to go the way you planned. Matter of fact, the way it's going to end up is going to be very different than what you planned. But it will be the way we worked it out. It became such a positive experience. We had such a great time doing it. And just as a bonus, I got to meet and lay down some goodwill with a bunch of local officials. So in the off chance that I need to bring in a mayor for like a presentation in one of my classes or a city council candidate, I've built up a ton of credibility that they will be treated fairly, that OTC defers and shows deference and cares about the people that represent us. And if you're an honest candidate running against one of these people, we'll give you an equal platform as well. That's really all I have to say. And I don't see any questions that are asked of me. I will mention that if you do have questions, please email me. You can find my contact information at otc.edu, but my name is Andrew Crocker. Just take my last name and add the letter A to it, Crocker A at otc.edu. We've been wanting to expand this to have not just Politically Active and these kinds of organizations in Springfield, but, you know, quote unquote, open up branches all across the state. And we are always happy to do that because it is tricky to run a nonpartisan political organization. But the reward is that you can hold events like these. Citizens aren't intimidated by it because it doesn't have a party's name tacked onto it. And of course, best of all, is that you get voters themselves get an even nonpartisan platform from which they can learn about the things that they care about. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. And I will now hand it over to Jacob Wilson, who will share some resources with us.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Verdis, for that. Before we get to the question and answer point, I just wanted to highlight a handful of resources. These are hyperlinked. Obviously, that's not helpful for you right now, but we'll be emailing out this presentation. So you'll have access to all of those. I think Andrew made several great points, and one that I think is so important in working with campuses. I've worked with faculty and staff and students who are a little bit nervous or hesitant to do anything that might be deemed political for concern of maybe appearing partisan or something along those lines. And I think what Andrew showed so well is that and Verdis, the points he made, that it is so important for us to focus on political education, and it's okay to lean into politics. And we can do that in a nonpartisan way. In terms of the events that Andrew spoke of, inviting candidates from all parties, bringing in issue advocates on both sides of an issue, things along those lines. And so I just want a friendly reminder there that being political can be done without being partisan. And it's really in order for us to make sure that we are making community colleges, democracies colleges again, that is a very important aspect. So first, I wanted to mention our nonpartisan candidate guides. CEEP, or the Campus Election Engagement Project, has created our regular presidential guide. It's a side-by-side comparison of the two major party candidates, and we also link to third-party candidates' websites as well, and encourage students to check those out. The Missouri gubernatorial race, that guide is in progress, and it should be ready in the next couple of weeks. And there's also a link on just how to distribute these guides. We have them as PDFs, but also as online resources, which is good for email. But just to give you some ideas there. Second, I wanted to talk about some digital and social media tools. CEEP created a toolkit for our partner campuses with social media graphics, as well as suggested content in terms of the caption that would go with it. And we have it calendared out as well. And so you'll have access to that. It's in a Google Drive. We have a Missouri Students Vote Facebook and a Students Vote Mo Instagram account. And those are tools that we're using to reach students during the pandemic. And I encourage you to check those out. And especially if you, in your department or on your campus, if you have an official Facebook or Instagram account, this is a great way to share content with your students that's accurate, nonpartisan. So I just wanted to bring those to your attention. Also, CEEP has purchased a premium membership with vote.org. And what that allows us to do, if your campus is interested in having vote.org web tools integrated to your website, that includes voter registration, voter education, voter registration, verifying that you're registered to vote, and also allows you to request an absentee ballot or sign up for election reminders. That is something that is a free resource for any campus in Missouri. And so you're more than welcome to just reach out to me when you have this PowerPoint. You'll be able to click on that and learn a little bit more. And you see we have a few videos here. We have a vote by mail series, video series. There are 3 different videos there. And then our incredibly close elections video. I'm sure that many of you who have worked with students and really just maybe you have friends and family who have said something along the lines of "my vote doesn't matter." And the incredibly close elections video is a great tool to highlight how just a few votes can and has swayed elections all across the country. And finally here, you see the movote.org. I've struggled to find a good tool that is online to help students request their absentee ballots without having to print out their request, sign it, then scan it and email it or mail it back. Movote.org is a nonpartisan effort that allows students, or really anyone actually who uses that, to fill out the form online, and with a touch screen device, either your smartphone or an iPad or tablet of some sort, you're able to sign it with your finger. And so that way it eliminates the need to have a printer, find a printer and mail it. And then it will give you the steps to email that to your local voting authority. And yep, you see the other resources there, our 7 key ways to act. Those are just our 7 kind of main areas that we encourage campuses to focus on to really institutionalize these election engagement practices. And the final is an assessment tool that we created for campuses to do a self-assessment to see where they are in terms of their election engagement practices on campus, and using that as a tool to plan ahead. So that's all I have for you. I'm going to turn it back over to Kalynn, and we're gonna exit the presentation mode for our conversation.
And Jacob, are people unmuted now to be able to talk, or do we still want them to chat in the chat box?
That's a great question. I believe that folks can raise their hand. There should be like a hand raise function, and or use the Q&A, and then we can unmute them that way.
Okay. So yes, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, or raise your hand, and I believe Jacob can unmute you.
There we go. Perfect.
Did you say you had some questions that were sent ahead of time that maybe we could go over while we wait for people to enter questions?
Yes, actually. So the first, and I'll kind of apply this with to Andrew for what you shared about politically active and the events that you have helped sponsor. Those efforts take a lot of time, you mentioned, and they take resources. And so I'm curious if you can talk to us about how you have navigated that, and how you have kind of either built a coalition on campus, or how you get the support that is needed to be successful there.
That's a really good question. I'm happy to say that in a way we're real unique, because we had students that were really enthusiastic and really energetic about doing it. And when the event started, they did all the work. For the most part, we did all the work in getting, the tables set up and stuff like that. But when it came to making sure everybody at the room knew where to go and interviewing the actual candidates, the students took the lead at that point. Now, as far as getting it set up, it took a fair amount of work. The good news is I didn't do all of it. I have a teammate in Kara Griffin who teaches political science as an adjunct. Her primary job was working in administrative services. She is now currently working in HR. And so she is uniquely placed to help us navigate a bunch of the administrative hurdles. Please make friends with someone from administrative services, because they think of all the stuff that you wouldn't think of as a mere instructor. I did not think about security. Kara thought of security. I did not think of having to reserve a table and getting refreshments on hand, which our own cafeteria very graciously provided. Kara did all that planning. She was great for it. It helps if you have a big fat map of your city that you could put up on an easel for people to walk in and see. Kara knows the people at the printing press here at the college, was able to use them. So it really helps if you're putting something together. I think you're working at a college campus, which is stacked with people who want to really be involved in these really cool activities and to make a difference. So use them. I'm fortunate enough that I've already worked with her on a regular basis, but if you don't have a person in administrative services, find one. Another thing, it was really her idea that we track our strategic initiative for the college, and strategic initiatives for the college to our mission. That is just an afternoon of work. That's not a lot of work there. But she worked a lot of the brick and mortar particulars that I just described to you. And they're not always super easy. Now my job, and this is why it helps to have teammates, my job, all I had to focus on was getting and I put quotes around this, all I had to do was reach out to over a dozen people who would eventually become participants at this event. So I had to reach out to all the city council people and shoot them emails, and in some cases call them and shoot them follow-up emails and shoot them follow-up calls. There was only one person, it was a school board candidate who I could not find great contact information. So you just have to get creative. One way you get creative is typically when you find them on social media, you'll notice you have mutual friends, and maybe you contact that person and say, hey, do you know this person? I've been wanting this person to participate. Could you reach out and say, he's a great guy and we'll treat you fair and blah, blah, blah. And when that didn't work, I stumbled across a neighboring college here in campus, here in Springfield. A neighboring college was having a school board voter event where you could go and ask them questions. I'm like, well, I guess I'm a voter. I might as well go. And then cornered her afterwards. And I was like, you know, hey, can you, but for the most part, these people are really easy to contact. You can call them and email them, and most of them will get back to you eventually. You just got to be organized, which I'm not the best at. You got to be organized, and you got to carve out some time. Don't do everything on the same day. You need to do it two or three over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. So I did a whole lot of the contacting. I did virtually all of the contacting and booking people, including, as I mentioned one moment ago, it's really hard to find people that oppose this one intersection tax. Just people aren't around creating organizations to oppose, you know, intersection upgrades. So I had to reach out. I had to get a little creative in that regard and reach out to the local Libertarian Party to ask if they'd stand against it. But the brick and mortar stuff really helps if you know an administrative person, because I just wouldn't have thought of everything. And as far as the reaching out to people to actually participate, that's a place where I was particularly strong on. And you just got to be willing to put in the sweat on it. You got to be willing to hustle a little bit. You got to be willing to put the work in, because, you know, I could have easily not done that, and my paycheck from my college would have been the same. So I was really only doing it because I really care about how people being actually aware of the things they'd be voting on and the people they'd be voting on.
It sounds like we all need a Kara in our lives.
Oh, for sure. That should be.
I know Kara, and I can echo she's amazing. She's my go-to a lot when anything OTC. With Michael Burke, he didn't really have a question, but he does have a comment. He says, "This is fascinating. Thanks. I teach composition at St. Louis Community College, Merrimack, and I ask the students to find out who their state representative is and to write them a letter supporting a particular bill. This makes students find out just who their state reps are. They have to research them and then where they stand on some issue. The students tell me that they learn just how important their state reps are in terms of affecting their lives daily. They also learn to write a business letter, which is also a useful skill." Yes, it is.
Can I expound on that, Kalynn?
Yes, please.
What was that gentleman's name?
Michael Burke.
Excellent. That's really great. Thank you, Michael Burke. I'll take that an extra step further. And because I think it's a really great idea to make contact with your state reps, especially your state reps. State senators, even at that level, they get a little busy and they might not be as responsive. State reps are super responsive because in Missouri, we're insane and we split the whole state into 163rds, and every 163rd sends a different rep to Jefferson City. So that means the districts in Missouri the House districts are very, very small. And so usually you're governing over a few neighborhoods and they'd love to come out and speak. So I actually do reach out to House representatives and I invite them to the classroom. Not, you know, now of course, but normally I invite them to the classroom and they can come and they can speak. And I give the students the assignment of looking them up and Googling them and learning about them and then sculpting questions that you could ask them in person. And so not only do students get to learn, put a face to the name of the person that would be governing them if they lived in that appropriate district, but they also get the ability to actually get a face-to-face answer from a rep, which is not always something that, not always an opportunity that we the voters get to do. I will say, this probably goes without saying, I try to be a nonpartisan guy with this particular club, but if you're gonna bring people in from Congress, in Missouri, we call it the General Assembly, into your class, really bend over backwards to make sure you're bringing in a Democrat and a Republican, because you don't want to create the appearance of, you know, being biased or improper. Because that's if you just want to be able to do this without a lot of people breathing down your neck, that's a really good idea.
And I urge the two of you to maybe get together and chat during our virtual convention this year. Just a little selfish, plug there.
Sure.
Jenna does have to go, Jenna Mueller, but she says, thanks so much for this. A comment for Verdis. When I travel in Europe and Scandinavia, I am always impressed with how many times I see kids during school, all ages, in safety jackets tending to the community, gardens, public parks, all designed to encourage civil responsibility for the world you inhabit. I'm always sadly jealous. I often include chores in this civic responsibility as well to grow it. Thanks so much, everyone. So next time you go to Europe or Scandinavia, why don't you invite Verdis and I, and then maybe we can see this as well. Jacob, did you have any other questions that you wanted to go to? I don't see any more in the chat.
No, I don't think we do. Andrew, Andrew, go for it.
I did have a comment on something that you had said a moment ago, Jacob, when you were speaking. You were talking about how it's so important to do this kind of stuff, and I do think it's important. One of the reasons why I think this kind of stuff is important, not just for community engaging on election ballots, which is what we did, but also engaging on the issues, really, really touchy issues. Because one thing, we faced pushback on this, and we were like, don't you feel like this stuff is a little too sensitive for these events? And what we had said was that it is sensitive, which is why we should do it. People should understand, either through practice or through at least seeing it done, that you could have these events on touchy subjects. The touchier, the better, because we face some on-campus blowback for having a Black Lives Matter discussion. That you can have these conversations that will remain civil. You can have vigorous disagreement, and it could remain fruitful. So I encourage people to do this kind of stuff, and don't feel like you got to wade gently. Oh, you do. You should be, diplomatic, but you definitely want to be willing to jump in on the more controversial the topic regarding our government and politics, the better.
We just got a question from, I believe, Chelsea. And it's a very important question here around faculty partnerships. So faculty partnerships are key. We need both sides, faculty and staff, to move them forward. So what can a staff member do to move faculty partnerships forward? And where can we fill the gaps and assist faculty in making these partnerships beneficial? I'd love to get Verdis and Andrew's thoughts on that. I just want to throw out one quick thing. Something that we've been working on at CEEP is really creating resources that are plug and play for faculty, knowing that time is very limited, and for a lot of faculty members who are in emergency online teaching mode still, having things like a sample syllabus language about voter registration, or a template for a course announcement for Blackboard or Canvas, whichever management system you use, and also working with your professional development office that works for and does faculty development to have this be a topic or a session that they work on. And so I'd love to get Verdis and then Andrew's thoughts.
Yes, the one thing that I have found that was beneficial in this, and I've spoken to some people who have like a long list of partners that they just keep in relationships that they have, is that whatever the partnership is, the students' role in it cannot just be, just a temporary volunteer, sorting through stuff, or, to take the place of a temporary employee. So it has to align with what is being learned, especially if you're saying faculty partnerships. Is that what you're talking about, faculty partnerships with outside partnerships, or are we talking about internal?
Yeah, I believe she is talking about with staff.
Oh, with staff. Oh, yeah, that's key. I thought it meant like community partnerships. Oh yeah. It's harder now, and Andrew can probably talk about this now. It's harder now that we're going into this social distancing type of thing. But one thing that that I found that was beneficial, especially being a faculty person and working with people in student life, is that this holistic education, Whereas, you know, the learning, I have learning, teaching, and outcomes. Student life has, you know, making sure that students have a campus life that supports them in that education, not seeing that as like two different fences, but the same, it's the same spectrum, that we're working together to make sure that the student has an environment that can foster education. And so understanding and respecting that role of the faculty in the instruction and understanding the role of the staff and providing that support, you will not see it as an extracurricular, but a co-curricular partnership. So, I mean, that's what I would say. I can give you specific examples, but I don't think we have the time.
I, as a faculty member and as an elected member, the vice chair of the Faculty Advisory Board to the MCCA, if you are in staff and you're looking to cooperate with faculty, you need to poke us, because we are not always the best. We're really, really good at coming up with ideas, really bad with the follow through. So if you're sitting there as a faculty, as a staff member, because as you and staff may know, you are operating in a different fiefdom most days than faculty. Think to yourself, who's, you know, if there's a part of the faculty that might want to work with this, it helps if you reach out to them and say so. Most faculty are excited about doing extracurricular stuff that they feel adds richness to the campus. Most of us want to be a net positive on campus. Now, I'm lucky enough that that didn't happen. I already work with a staff person who's willing to break her back to get stuff done. But one thing I would really advise you to do is take initiative, because there's no downside. There's zero downside. Reach out to the faculty member, hopefully one with a high initiative, taking the initiative drive and coming up with the idea with them.
I did want to add real quick, the resources that Jacob shared, I believe I have shared those out earlier this year in the spring. I can do so again if there's interest, that's not a problem, but I also believe I put them into our repository so members can access those resources as you need. Chelsea says, thank you all for your thoughts. This is great information. I don't have any, I don't see any more questions in Q&A or in the chat, and I don't believe Jacob has any more. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to Jacob to close us out.
Thank you so much, Kalynn. The final thing I wanted to mention, so Amy Ludwig has joined the call. She's the Executive Director of Campus Election Engagement Project, and she reminded us all about the CEEP Action Grants. These are grants that range up to $1,000, potentially more on a case-by-case basis, but they're focused on helping support your campus efforts to empower student voters. I put a link there, and I will ask Kalynn to send those out. It's a very easy application, and that's one because it's due this Friday. And so we know it's a quick turnaround, but if you have things that you're working on and need funding for that, this could be an excellent opportunity for you. And now with that, I wanted to thank Verdis and Andrew for joining us today, sharing their expertise and experience with us, and also to thank Kalynn and her colleagues at Missouri Community College Association and 25th Hour for their support of this session. I also want to thank the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement and the Center for Social Development at Washington University, who has helped us with all of the tech components for this, and as well as acknowledge NASPA and the Missouri Foundations for Health for grants that we've received that have helped make this possible. And finally, last but not least, I want to thank each of you for attending and for the wonderful questions and your engagement during this session. And if you have any questions for the panelists, myself, or Kalynn, we will provide you our contact information, and we look forward to supporting you between now and November 3rd and then after, because local elections are very important. So with that, thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.